Can you imagine what happens when total power falls into the hands of someone who has lost their mind? Think of an emperor who doesn't hesitate to order executions just for fun, who dresses his own horse in royal robes, and even plans to appoint him a senator. Sounds like madness or a myth, right? Well, this nightmare was real in ancient Rome. His name, Caligula, considered by many to be the most terrifying ruler history has ever known. In just 4 years of imperial rule, he sowed a legacy of terror and madness so profound that 2,000 years later, his name still sends shivers down the spine. You may think history is boring, but let me tell you the dark legend of Caligula, the most ruthless emperor Rome has ever seen. But who was Caligula before he became the hated tyrant? Most only remember him as a murderous madman who plunged Rome into chaos. But he wasn't born a monster. He came from a family of heroes, raised among soldiers, and hailed as Rome's great future. His youth was marked by tragedy, power, and a fear that shaped his destiny. Many historians agree that the seeds of Caligula's cruelty germinated in those childhood years marked by pain and betrayal. Before he ever donned imperial robes, this man was born on August 31st, 12 AD, in the Roman city of Antium, under the name Julius Caesar Germanicus. He came from one of Rome's most influential families. His father, Germanicus, was a grandson of Mark Antony, and his mother, Agrippina the Elder, was descended from none other than Augustus, the first Roman emperor. The surname Germanicus was synonymous with power and greatness throughout the empire, and Caligula was expected to reach monumental heights even before he uttered his first word. Germanicus was not only an admired general, but a true hero to the Roman army and people, considered by many to be the legitimate heir to Emperor Tiberius. From a young age, Caligula walked in his father's golden shadow, dressed in a small soldier's uniform and tiny boots, which gave him a nickname that would immortalize him, Caligula, Little Boots. More than a warrior, he was a living symbol of Rome's future, smiling alongside his father in parades and captivating crowds, even giving speeches at just 6 years old. But the light of his lineage soon turned to shadow. In 19 AD, Germanicus fell ill during a campaign in the eastern provinces and died in Antioch. His wife, Agrippina, was convinced he had been poisoned. Rumors of conspiracy under the orders of Emperor Tiberius began to circulate, fearing that Germanicus was too popular and dangerous for the throne. Whether true or not, the loss shattered the world of young Caligula, who was barely 7 years old when he accompanied his mother and siblings in a seemingly endless funeral procession following his father's coffin through the streets of Rome. From then on, her family became a target of the emperor's paranoia. Agrippina, with her fierce ambition, pushed her sons toward the crown, but Tiberius saw them as a threat. He watched their every move and began to act cruelly. In 29 AD, Agrippina and Caligula's older brother, Nero, were arrested on charges of treason, accused of plotting against the emperor and sent into exile. A year later, another brother, Drusus, suffered the same fate. Both would die far from Rome, and Agrippina never returned. Caligula, now orphaned from his immediate family, was sent to live first with his great-grandmother Livia, and then with his grandmother Antonia, a young boy cut off from all he knew, surrounded by enemies, and caught in a web of palace intrigue that would shape his dark destiny. By 31 AD, Caligula was sent to the island Capri, the solitary retreat of the Emperor Tiberius, an old, paranoid, and isolated man. From this luxurious paradise, Tiberius ruled from a distance, shrouded in rumors of cruelty, betrayal, and unbridled corruption. There, Caligula became a silent shadow. He smiled when the emperor smiled, remained silent when others shouted, and learned quickly that one wrong word could spell his death. On Capri, he witnessed executions ordered by Tiberius, confessions forced from him, and a paranoia that consumed everyone around him. Some believe it was on that island that Caligula's mind began to crack. Others, that he was simply learning to survive and rule in an unforgiving, trustless world. He lived like a prince, but every step was marked by fear. He knew what had happened to his mother. He knew his brothers were gone. He had no friends, no protection, no freedom. But there was one thing he never lost: his patience. Meanwhile, Drusus, Tiberius' adopted son, and Caligula's older brother, died in prison accused of treason, leaving a gap in the line of succession. Thus, Caligula became one of the strongest candidates for the throne, along with his cousin Gemellus. 2 years later, Tiberius designated them both as his successors, but Caligula had a secret weapon that Gemellus lacked: the support of the feared Praetorian Guard. Following the fall of Sejanus, the man who had collaborated with Tiberius to eliminate much of the Roman elite, including Caligula's family, a new commander named Macro took over the reins of the Guard. It was he who worked behind the scenes to ensure Caligula's rise, forging alliances and plotting behind the scenes. Then, in March of 37 AD, Tiberius died. Some whisper that Caligula was behind his death, that he was murdered by asphyxiation. The truth is that, overnight, the path to power was open to him. Some claim that Tiberius simply died of old age, but the truth is that Macro wasted no time. With lightning speed, he had the Praetorian Guard proclaim Caligula emperor. The Senate had no choice but to accept, and the people of Rome, remembering Germanicus, greeted him with thunderous cheers. Caligula was only 24 years old, but he had already survived betrayals, exiles, and unimaginable terrors. Now he was in command of the largest and most powerful empire in the world. The crowd saw in him a charming young man, the son of a hero, the symbol of a new beginning. They believed that, at last, the darkness of the Tiberius years was behind them. And for the first few months, Caligula gave them exactly what they craved. He canceled odious taxes, allowed the return of exiles, freed political prisoners, and restored forgotten monuments. He paid bonuses to soldiers and filled the streets with spectacles, colors, scents, and music. He poured his personal fortune into flooding Rome with gold and hope. The Senate embraced him enthusiastically. For a moment, it seemed Rome had a truly committed leader. But that light faded quickly, very quickly. Just months after rising to power, Caligula fell gravely ill. A ferocious fever consumed his body, and with it, his mind began to fracture. Some whispered that he was poisoned. Others, that the illness left irreparable damage to his brain. The truth is that the man who awoke from that crisis was no longer the same. The Caligula who emerged proclaimed himself like no other emperor before him, a living god, not a mere servant of the gods, but Jupiter himself incarnate. He grew a golden beard and carried lightning bolts in his hands, like the king of the Roman gods. He posed proudly beside statues of Jupiter and challenged actors and nobles to decide who was the most powerful. Those who doubted suffered his wrath to tears. He ordered a temple built in his honor, where a golden statue of him, as tall as himself, stood majestically. Every day, the figure wore the same clothes Caligula wore, and wealthy Romans competed to become priests at that sanctuary, offering exotic beasts as sacrifices to appease their god-emperor. Like flamingos at a divine festival, nobles and followers worshipped the living god. His temple was not far away, attached to his own palace, because for Caligula, there was no separation between religion and power. He was the center of both. His ambition bordered on madness. He dreamed of bringing the famous statue of Zeus from Greece, only to decapitate it and replace it with his own. He dared to say that the moon goddess was in love with him, that he spoke to the gods during the day and seduced them at night. He would stand on balconies to converse with the sky and claim that the ocean whispered secrets to him when he couldn't sleep. He asked his guards if they had ever seen the moon goddess at his side. One replied that only gods could see other gods. Caligula smiled, pleased, and appointed him his close advisor. His laws began to terrify them all. He forbade laughter around him, and laughter became a crime. Anyone who dared to smile at inappropriate moments could pay with life. After the death of his sister Domitilla, whom he loved with a disturbing intensity, some even say he lusted after her, he decreed a national mourning so rigorous that no one could bathe, attend festivals, or eat with their families. Those who disobeyed were executed. All of Rome was forced to mourn under his rule. He forbade anyone to mention goats in his presence, convinced that they were mocking his thick coat of hair and his receding hairline, a secret he tried to hide at all costs. No one could look down on him from a higher place, and when he passed by, people had to bow their heads or go downstairs to avoid his level. In mirrors, he would practice terrifying stares, try to appear godlike, and demanded that his guards mimic his every expression. Senators were publicly humiliated, forced to run behind his chariot like slaves and fight in mock battles just for his amusement. He no longer sought to rule. He wanted to dominate, to destroy the pride and dignity of anyone who bravely appeared before him. Historians still debate whether Caligula was truly insane or simply a cruel sadist, but for the Romans, there was no doubt. The acclaimed young man had transformed into a monster demanding absolute worship, blind obedience, and total silence. His rules were absurd and his punishments unpredictable. The city that had once celebrated his arrival now lived in fear of his voice. And this was just the beginning. Caligula delighted in unimaginable luxuries, bathing in liquid gold, drinking pearls dissolved in wine, walking barefoot on jeweled carpets, and sleeping on floors covered with precious gems. He built floating palaces on giant boats adorned with mosaics, marble columns, and hot baths. He wore clothes embroidered with precious stones and served his guests golden dishes that no one could eat. At his banquets, he ordered musicians to play while birds with jeweled necklaces fluttered around the room. Everything around him glittered with overflowing wealth, and every building, every object had a single purpose: to impress, to dominate, and to demonstrate that there was no limit to his power and extravagance. But all that splendor came at a price. In his first year as emperor, Caligula spent nearly 2.7 billion sesterces, completely emptying the empire's treasury. He used Rome's money to fund games, festivals, temples, and massive extravaganzas, like that famous bridge built entirely of ships that spanned miles across the Bay of Baia. Caligula rode across it, wearing the armor of Alexander the Great, defying the world and proving that his power knew no bounds. The bridge was a pointless project, created solely so Caligula could prove he could command the sea, no matter the cost. And the empire paid dearly for that extravagance. When the treasury ran dry, the young emperor made not a single cut in his spending. Instead, he invented new ways to fill the coffers, many as absurd as they were cruel and humiliating. Taxes were everywhere. He taxed lawsuits, charging 2.5% for each case brought to court. He levied taxes on food arriving in the city. He imposed taxes on the wages of porters, artisans, and even slaves. He spared no one, not even prostitutes, even those who were retired or married. And to top it all off, he established a marriage tax. But that wasn't all. To ensure the money flowed, he replaced the traditional tax collectors with military personnel. Centurions and tribunes of Praetorian Guard became armed and feared collectors. These soldiers' visits caused panic. They often took more than they should have, and anyone who dared to complain was punished mercilessly. Caligula also resorted to blatant theft. He accused wealthy citizens of treason or insults, condemned them to death, and confiscated their property. Sometimes, he forged letters or altered wills to seize their lands. If someone died without leaving enough money to the emperor, they were declared ungrateful and stripped of everything. Senators, generals, merchants, no one was safe. Entire families were ruined overnight. Many chose suicide rather than face the charges. He even decreed that every loyal citizen must leave him something in their will, drawing up lists of legacies that he demanded be fulfilled. Thus, death became a mortal danger for the wealthy, who began to hide their fortunes or secretly give them away, hoping to deceive the emperor. Among his most extravagant projects were Nemi boats, 2 floating palaces anchored on a lake, each over 60 meters long, covered in marble, with running water, heated rooms, banquet halls, and golden statues. Their sails were made of colorful silk, and they sailed aimlessly, only for parties and ostentation, all financed by abusive taxes and stolen fortunes. But Caligula's madness didn't end there. He ordered tunnels dug through mountains, roads cut across rivers, and hills leveled just to prove that the world bent to his will. He had artisans demolish walls and rebuild them for no reason, and he ordered engineers to design movable buildings. His obsession with the impossible grew daily, as did his out-of-control spending. The only thing he loved more than gold and pleasure was his favorite horse, Incitatus, a white stallion whose name meant swift in Latin. Caligula treated Incitatus like a true king. He gave him a marble stable, an ivory steward, and a necklace encrusted with precious stones. The horse slept under purple blankets, the most exclusive color reserved only for emperors and gods. Incitatus had his own house, with servants, furniture, and slaves dedicated exclusively to his care. Before race days, Caligula ordered absolute silence in the neighborhood so his horse could rest undisturbed. Soldiers guarded the streets, and no one was allowed to make a sound near the stable. A lover of racing and obsessed with giving him the best, Caligula fed Incitatus oats mixed with gold flakes and toasted his health with wine served in golden cups. He invited him to dinner at his banquets and treated him like a close advisor. When dignitaries arrived, he joked that Incitatus could invite them to dinner at his house, and even claimed that his horse understood politics better than many senators. Imagine the powerful senators sitting in their chamber when Caligula made his most shocking and disconcerting announcement. His beloved horse, Incitatus, would be consular of Rome. In ancient Roman society, consulship was the highest political distinction, a position reserved only for most experienced statesmen, who governed and commanded the legions in a delicate balance of power. But Caligula decided to break all the rules. He claimed before the Senate that Incitatus was more loyal and intelligent than any of them, and that he deserved to wear the consul's robes and occupy the seat of power. According to the historian Suetonius, the emperor even ordered official ceremonies to prepare the horse, naming him a priest and preparing him for the swearing in as consul. The senators, caught in a mixture of fear and humiliation, had no choice but to applaud, smile, and bow to the animal. No one dared to question them, because Caligula made his opinion very clear. The Senate was weak, useless, and completely manipulable. Choosing a horse as consular officer sent a brutal message to the Roman elite. They could be replaced by an animal, and nothing would change. For historians, that act wasn't just a mockery, it was a warning, an open challenge to Rome's most powerful men to stop, to respond, or succumb. But they remained silent. The fear of the emperor's wrath was stronger than their pride. Incitatus may never have formally become consul, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that Caligula had ordered the symbolic coup. He had shown the people that titles and authority were mere toys in his hands. While he seized lands from generals and executed citizens, his horse enjoyed palaces and servants. Incitatus wore royal purple, the color reserved only for emperors. While many Romans died of starvation, Rome had become a farce, and everyone was forced to laugh along with him. But beneath that laughter, they whispered, wondering if Caligula had completely lost his mind or was simply playing a dark game that no one could understand. Many believed that this was a turning point, when power ceased to be based on laws or reason and became the absolute will of a single man. With his horse, Caligula demonstrated that he could do and say whatever he wanted without anyone stopping him. And although up to that point his behavior was already sick and excessive, it was only the prelude to what he truly felt for human life. Caligula constantly reminded everyone that he could kill anyone he wanted, anytime he wanted. He proclaimed this in public, whispered it to senators at private dinners, and repeated it to those closest to him. For him, the ability to take a life without reason was the ultimate expression of power. His followers lived in constant terror, never knowing if a look, a word, or even a smile could become their death sentence. There were no rules, no warnings, only the emperor's capricious mood. His most famous phrase, "Let them hate me but fear me," was not just a motto, but the foundation of his reign. Every decision, every punishment, every execution was designed to sow fear. He didn't need trials or evidence to eliminate someone. The simple fact that a senator's hairstyle looked better than his own was grounds for death. Others were killed for being overjoyed, for making a joke, or simply to send a message to the crowd. And worst of all, many of these deaths became macabre entertainment. Caligula invited his friends, nobles, and politicians to banquets where blood and terror were part of the spectacle. According to the ancient historian Suetonius, Caligula took sadism to another level, executing people in the middle of his own banquets. As the guests quietly chewed, the agonizing screams of the condemned echoed through the hall. Blood stained the floor beside the golden cups, and the emperor, impassive, would lean back, take a sip of wine, and smile coldly. On one occasion, he invited a man to dinner whose son he had ordered killed that very day. When the guests arrived trembling, Caligula didn't say a word. He wanted to see which of the two emotions would prevail, fear or pain. For him, suffering was the seasoning that made food taste better. He said that pain awakened the appetite. Some guests couldn't stand it and vomited. Others remained silent, terrified of reacting. Any sign of disgust could be fatal. But Caligula watched them with delight, enjoying every second of their discomfort. These macabre dinners became tests of loyalty, Those who passed earn another chance at life. But the terror wasn't limited to banquets. In the gladiatorial arena, Caligula meted out brutal punishments and ruthless revenge. He not only sent slaves and criminals to fight for their lives, but also forced nobles and senators to take up swords and engage in mortal combat. People who had never touched a weapon were thrown to a swift, bloody, and humiliating death. Sometimes, he didn't even bother to find a motive. He simply pointed to someone and ordered their execution. No one dared to challenge him. Those who hesitated ended up in the arena. Guards dragged the victims through the streets, and some were thrown to the wild beasts. Others, terrified, were forced to kill each other for the entertainment of the emperor, who personally chose a method of execution. When the sun blazed down furiously and the heat became unbearable, Caligula would order the awnings removed from the amphitheater, leaving the crowd to sweat and suffer under the blazing sun. It was a cruel test of patience, a brutal reminder that even their comfort was under his control. Some spectators fainted, others died, and as always, no one dared complain, because complaints were mercilessly punished. On one occasion, Caligula himself entered the arena to fight in rigged matches, where his opponents were forced to lose. The crowd applauded out of obligation, because fear robbed them of all freedom. For Caligula, everything was a theatrical spectacle. Every death, another act in his sinister circus. One of his most atrocious orders was a mass execution of a section of the public simply for booing a fight. Hundreds of people were dragged away and killed for expressing their disagreement. For Caligula, human life was a plaything he could destroy or preserve at will. His reign was based on absolute terror, and that fear was the essence of his power. But what he failed to understand was that fear has limits. The terror and humiliation he inflicted, which he saw as cruel entertainment, eventually came back to haunt him. Even his most loyal protectors became enemies. In 41 AD, after just 4 years on the throne, the self-proclaimed god was stabbed to death in a dark hallway by his own guards. Perhaps it was a childhood trauma that shattered his mind. Perhaps madness consumed him, or perhaps power poisoned his soul. But in the end, none of it matters, because nothing can erase what he did. History remembers him not as a genius or a god, but as the ultimate symbol of boundless cruelty. And for that, Caligula rightfully bears the title of the cruelest emperor Rome has ever known.